So I've been hearing all these people complaining that they want a Warlock build and all kinds of fun stuff. So we're gonna do a Warlock build. We're gonna do probably the most just fun and powerful build this season. And that is basically the Consecration Warlock. So let's kind of get over here. Let's get into some enemies and let's kind of see what this bad boy looks like. So there's kind of multiple ways to play this build. Right now I'm just kind of in altars. Nothing crazy. It's just a quick thing to load up. Nothing insane. But you'll notice that this is a lot like Consecration, where you're just going to kind of just run in with your melee just as you can and just kind of go off. Alright. It's pretty straightforward. It's nothing too crazy. I tend to use a Strand and a Void weapon with this because you'll get a lot of melee kills, obviously, so you'll keep Unravel pretty consistently. And then you'll get the Shatter kills from your grenade pretty often, so you'll get Volatile pretty easily too. Now, that is more to future-proof this build a little bit more. If you want to go using Strand and Void weapons routes, completely up to you what weapons you use. You're pretty open for this to use whatever you want. But I rather enjoy the two just because the synergy is just fun. But really, this season you can kind of get away with not running any kind of fragments that do that. So we'll look at our fragments and everything in a little bit, and you'll see kind of what I'm talking about. Okay, with that being said, so this is our actual subclass, all right? So our subclass, for the most part, there's only a few things we really care about. One of the big things I enjoy is Needle Storm, where your artifact makes a lot of threadlings this season, and where you're going to be making a lot of threadlings with this build, or the potential to. Again, depending on your weapons, this may be different. You can always change the super if you need to. You can change it out. I like it because it helps you perch your threadlings, and that's always a nice time. And it's also just a quick... If you use it, you'll get a lot of darkness energy really quick. So if you're ever low on darkness energy, you have all your light energy, you're like, crap, I really want transcendence, and you have Needle Storm, pop it, get your transcendence back. It's super quick, super easy, right? All right, we're gonna use Arcane Needle for obvious reasons. You get 3 charges of it when you go transcendent. 3 charges is better than 1 charge. If you are not getting transcendent super quickly, it is not an awful idea to switch to a different melee, okay? And the only reason I say that is because Arcane Needle does have a pretty high cooldown, okay? If you are not great at this build at first, you really struggle with keeping your cooldowns up, you feel like you're running out of melee, you feel like you have a lot of downtime, you have 2 options. That's either to put Monte Carlo on, or you could swap it out with a melee that has a smaller cooldown, okay? Totally fine. It will not make you crank damage nearly as hard, but it will kind of keep the cooldown up a lot more often, just because, I mean, this is 2 minutes, 10 seconds for the base needle. Do remember, though, your 2nd and 3rd charge of Arcane Needle do come back a little bit faster, just by the way, if you didn't know that, BT dubs. But if you're having issue, put Incinerator Snap or something on. It's fine. It won't be the end of the world. Will you be as efficient? No, but sometimes just kind of getting used to something first is more important than worrying about efficiency. Get used to it first. Then once you kind of feel good about it, you can keep cooldowns a lot better. Switch to Arcane Needle. It'll change your life. It'll do so much better. But you do have to worry about that cooldown a little bit if you're not careful. We're going to use Cold Snap Grenade just because we're going to need Darkness Energy. You could get Darkness Energy from your weapons. I use Barodiad with this a lot just because I like Barodiad. There's nothing saying you have to use it. Again, you can use whatever weapons you want, really. If you're getting a lot of Darkness Energy, you probably don't need Cold Snap Grenade. But Cold Snap Grenade's good for just getting some Darkness Energy. It's good for freezing groups. It's good for getting the Shatter off when you also hit your Lightning Surge, which is just extra damage, especially for beefier targets. It's pretty straightforward. Nothing crazy. Past that, we have Feed the Void, Lightning Surge. Feed the Void's pretty straightforward. We want Devour. It's nice. Lightning Surge, again, pretty straightforward. This is basically a melee build. You're sliding in, using your Lightning Surge. You're getting Bolt Charge, which is feeding back into your melee, and it's going to help you crank out some more damage. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, if you don't understand how that works, I don't know what to tell you. I'm using Facet of Courage right now. Typically, I would actually swap this out with Facet of Bravery. The only reason I'm not using Facet of Bravery right now is because there's so much stuff on the artifact that gives you that. And Facet of Courage is good, don't get me wrong, but especially in most content, the extra damage you're getting from Facet of Courage is actually not going to change the game too much if you want the honest to God truth. If you're playing something harder like GMs and stuff like that, you definitely need Facet of Courage on. There is no doubt about that. That little bit of damage that you can squeak out makes a difference. But in most content, which is what most people are going to be playing, just like your general content, you don't really need Facet of Courage. It's nice. It's not going to change your life. But Facet of Bravery, I would definitely say more often than not if you're just wanting for like a good build for general, just everyday content. Especially if using Strand and Void weapons, you're going to keep them both up pretty well. Some people are under the misconception that Cold Snap is not great at getting volatile rounds. Do remember the Shatter from Cold Snap grenades is what actually procs it. And a lot of times that will kill smaller enemies. Once again, especially in kind of just general everyday content. You will be getting both. Don't worry. If you're not getting both, then you're messing something up somewhere, okay? Because you'll keep them both up pretty easily. If you feel like you're not, then there's something somewhere that you're missing. Either you're just freezing like one thing with your Cold Snap, which obviously the Shatter's not going to do much because you're most likely just going to kill him with your melee anyways, and stuff like that. But anyways, it's pretty straightforward. Facet of Hope, we're going to use Facet of Hope just because more class ability regen is just kind of good for us. If we get good class ability regen, we can just kind of feed back into ourselves. We're using Heart of Inmost with this one, so that's really important. Let me go and put Facet of Courage back on. So it just gives us abilities quicker. It also just gives us our on-demand healing quicker. You know, Devour's nice, but every now and again you get caught with your pants down, so it's a good thing to have your Phoenix dive up as much as you can. Facet of Protection, we're diving in deep, might as well be protected. Facet of Dominance. Now, Facet of Dominance can be swapped out if you want to. I like Facet of Dominance so that when I pop Transcendence, my Transcendence nade, the Freezing Singularity, will actually weaken targets, okay? You don't have to do this. I enjoy it. I like when I'm in Transcendence for my stuff to be weakening as well, because then it can weaken for beefier targets, it'll freeze, and then I can jump on in and do a Lightning Surge on them. You don't have to do that. There's plenty of other options. If you really want to like go ability heavy, Facet of Balance isn't bad. I enjoy Facet of Balance for like more of my heavier builds, or even Facet of Awakening. You'll be getting a lot of Lightning Surge kills, so you might as well, you know, get an Ionic Trace or two with it too. Lots of great stuff. Depends on what you want to do. If you want to be ability centric, those are two great fragments. They could always be swapped out here. Facet of Dawn, it's pretty straightforward. Radiant did get nerfed a little bit. At least when you apply Radiant yourself, not from like Well of Radiance and stuff like that. But it's still good. Weapon buffs is always nice. So when you go in, use your melee, you're kind of beefed up and now your weapons are even better. And especially like I was talking about before, if you have something like Facet of Bravery on, then immediately you've gone in, you've done your melee, you have Unraveling Rounds, and now your weapons are just doing extra damage because of Radiant. It kind of just loops into itself really well. But again, we'll talk about our artifact. Again, our artifact will kind of negate out that need of Facet of Bravery. We'll talk about that a little bit. Alright, mods. So with mods, you will notice I'm leaving out the stat mods. These are up to you, okay? I'm not going to put my stat mods on here because for some reason it confuses people. I don't want to confuse people. What I would really focus on as far as your build goes, my discipline's a little high right now. It's because I've just saved this loadout on my thing and where I'm using my Facet, where I'm not using Facet of Bravery. Facet of Bravery usually puts that down to 100 instead, so that's why that is the way that it is. I would really focus on resilience first and foremost. Resilience is just survivability. Survivability is always good. I like high discipline. You could go high strength instead. I would say that high strength is probably better for this build. Getting your Arcane Needle back faster and faster. There's nothing wrong with it. I actually have the penalized strength right now. It doesn't bother me much because I can usually get Transcendence pretty reliably, so my strength cooldown isn't a big deal. If you do struggle with getting your Transcendence up though, focus on your strength stat. It'll make a big difference. It'll make your melee come back quicker so that you can kind of keep feeding the loop. But if you can feed the loop pretty well and you know how to keep your Transcendence up, the strength stat really isn't that important because you won't need more than a few melees before you hit Transcendence. And when you hit Transcendence, you've immediately got all your charges back, so who really cares at that point? And then, yeah, like I said, I enjoy Discipline. You're getting Devour, though. So the biggest thing I'd say is Resilience. That's really your biggest thing. But then Discipline strength. Up to you, though. All right, for our helmet, it's going to be pretty straightforward. Again, I like Void and Strand weapons, so I'm using both of those Siphons. And then I'm also using a hands-on mod. I'm getting a lot of melee kills. I might as well be getting my super back quicker. I'm using all heavy-handed mods so that I can always have an orb up and ready to go. Now, I will say this one is this one's kind of more of a baked-in part of whenever I'm using this in harder content. So I didn't really talk about that. I need to go back and show you this real quick. So one thing that I will swap out a lot of times is I will also put on Facet of Purpose, okay? And Facet of Purpose is honestly overkill for most things. Facet of Purpose is only really going to help you in stuff that's actually like really difficult. And 90% of people who are probably watching this are probably not engaging in like super difficult content, okay? But Facet of Purpose, when you go in, you use your melee, you have your orb right there in front of you, you pick it up, now you have Woven Mail, okay? It just helps your survivability. So that's kind of a remnant of that. But other than that, this just helps you gen orbs quicker, and we're going to use that along with some of our leg mods to make ourselves even better. Your chest piece is going to be kind of up to you. I just do Arc, Solar, and Void, just kind of my general resistances. You can kind of do whatever, it doesn't matter. It depends on the activity, honestly. Again, a lot of times you don't even like super need that. Your legs, you have Absolution. I'm using both Absolutions because I'm making orbs very often. I'm picking them up very often. I might as well just make my abilities come back quicker. There's literally no reason not to. I use a Scav. I'm using a Void Special and a Void Heavy, so I'm going to use a Void Scav. You can use a different Scav if you want. Heck, you can put a Surge here if you want. It's completely up to you. I don't usually use Surges unless I'm like in like a raid environment or something like that, truthfully. Just because most of the time you're going to be doing fine damage as it is, unless you're like doing something where you really need like min-max damage, like a raid, or if you're trying to like go really high in like expert Court of Blades or something like that. That's really the only times I'll say that like surges are like super needed. But for the most part, again, general play, it's not going to be that big of a deal. And then on our class item, we're going to use Powerful Attraction. We're going to use Phoenix Dive pretty often. We might as well just pick up all the orbs around us, get kind of the remnants. Distribution, once again, we'll be using our Phoenix Dive quite often. Again, this is going to be a pretty aggressive build, so you're going to be pretty much up in there. So Distribution will go off pretty much every time you use your class ability. And finally, Fawn of Restoration. This one's pretty flexible. You could put something like Reaper here if you want like some extra orbs or something. I only use Fawn of Restoration because typically my recovery stat's a little bit lower than I want it to be a lot of times. So for example, like right now it's at 37. It would technically be higher if I had all my mods in. Again, we're kind of, you know, I'm taking that stuff off so it doesn't confuse people. But Fawn of Restoration, you know, I'm using that to kind of bump up my recovery stat. You can use it, you can use something else. That's a pretty flexible spot. Do what you want with it. But once again, you can change a lot of these things depending on what you need. All right, next is our actual artifact. Now, our artifact is what kind of makes this build like super nice this season, okay? Because there's a lot of things on the artifact that are just kind of nice, especially if you end up, like I said, focusing on Void and your strand weapons. So you have Unraveling Orbs. So you're going to be getting orbs all the time. So Unraveling is going to be up on any kind of strand weapon you have almost all of the time. Volatile Marksman exists. So once again, when you're using your Void weapons, you're going to be getting Volatile on it very quickly, very often, all right? You have a lot of great things just in general. Maligned Harvest, volatile targets, and this is a Void. Oh my goodness, I can't speak. Especially if you're using something that just defeats with volatile super quickly, like an AoE burst or anything like that. Maligned Harvest is nice. Horde Shuttle. This is kind of an example artifact. You can change stuff up as you need. I use fusion rifles a lot. You can use Power Reconstruction. If you're not using fusion rifles but using like an LMG, Heavy Ordnance Regeneration isn't bad. Void Flux is nice. Again, a lot of it just kind of juices your weapons because your abilities are already going to be good. So if you're just juicing your weapons, you know, it just kind of just evens out the build that much more. It just makes it that much better. So that's what kind of makes the artifact really good, is it can kind of really, it can really round out the edges of, now my weapons are really good and my abilities are really good. So everything's just working very well together. Past that, a lot of this is up to you. I'm going to use the class item with Spirit of Inmost Light and Spirit of Syntheseps. You could use something a little different. I really wouldn't, though. I'd really keep the Spirit of Syntheseps. If you really want to change out Spirit of Inmost Light, I guess you could. If you want to like Osmiomancy so your cold snaps are a little bit better, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But I would definitely do Inmost just because it helps you get everything back quicker. There's never, it's never bad to get abilities back quicker with how powerful they are in this game, especially with this build. And then the exotic I use is Barodiad. You don't have to use Barodiad. I use Barodiad. I just like Barodiad, okay? I'm not going to act like I've used the crap out of it this season or anything like that. I haven't played much of this episode, if you couldn't tell. But it's fun. You can use a different strand weapon. Like I said, if you really struggle with like keeping melees up and you're not getting Prismatic super quickly or Transcendent super quickly, then feel free to swap this out with like Monte Carlo and stuff. A lot of this stuff can change out. Again, you're getting volatile, so I'm using a Void special and a Void heavy. But again, it's completely up to you. A lot of this is up to you. So anyways, that's the build. It's pretty straightforward. Tweak it to what you need. This build can be done in a lot of different ways. Like I said, like I was talking about, like with like facet of purpose. Like throw in facet of purpose if you're going to be doing something harder. But if you're going to be doing like really easy stuff and you just want to spam everything and have a good time, put on like facet of balance or something like that. Like there's just a lot of really big like flexibility with this build, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't really pay attention to a lot of times. So just change it how you want to. Enjoy your playstyle, okay? Most of this game is easy. Don't overthink it. Don't think you have to use like this uber amazing build. You can change it for stuff that works better for you at the end of the day. It won't really change it that much. Anyways, I appreciate it. Thanks for watching.